we now have Siadam Edmo with Seeding Justice and Indigenize. Welcome, Siadam, and her husband, James Parker. Here's some water for you guys, just in case. And James is with the Oregon Native Chamber of Commerce and also Indigenize. Welcome you all. I'll give you the stage. Give them some love, everybody. Siadam and James.
Start off with intros. You go first. No, you go first.
This is the problem with putting a husband and wife up on stage. No, you, honey, you go first. Okay, I'll go first. Hi, everyone. My name is Siadam Edmo. I'm Shoshone Bannock Nez Person Yakima, and I'm the co-owner. And I just like randomly called myself the CEO when we started, so I'm sticking with that of Indigenize. And also run an organization called Seeding Justice.
Excellent. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is James Allen Parker. I'm an enrolled citizen for the Chippewa Cree Tribal Nation. I act as the executive director for the Oregon Native American Chamber, not of Commerce. We're a 501c3. And then I also am involved in our exciting new business, Indigenize. And I dabble in a few other things. Here in Indian country where we wear multiple hats. So I'm also the deputy director for the Affiliated Tribes of Northwest Indians, so regional policy and advocacy organization representing nearly 50 tribes here in the Northwest. That sounds like enough. Yeah. Okay.
Well, also we're parents. We have 3 children.
Yeah.
We live with my parents.
They live with us.
They live with us. Bless you, I love you. I think I get to start with you. Oh, no.
I go first.
Okay.
I'll go first.
Okay.
So we took crib notes. It's been a long week. So what does Indigenize mean? Tell us about the genesis of the name and why it makes sense for us as entrepreneurs and makes sense for consumers.
So to be indigenous is a noun, right? It's a thing. We're both indigenous to this place, and as our 9-year-old says, she. How many folks are familiar with Molly of Denali? And have kids? Yeah. Okay. So
it's quiet.
I know it's really quiet. So I was like, oh, so excited! There's this like new cartoon show about. Molly from Denali, and I was really excited that my kids were watching it and able to see, like, have Native representation on the television. And our daughter said, "Mom, it's not Molly from Denali, it's Molly of Denali." And I thought that was so insightful of her when she said it, just because we as Indigenous people, I mean, I've heard people say it all the time, and we say it as Oregonians. People talk about themselves as Native Oregonians, and to me, that's fine. It's okay if you think of yourself like that, but I think there's a difference, and a distinct difference from those of us who are actually of this place and our indigeneity. And so to the name Indigenize, you know, we chose it on purpose because it was a verb. It was simultaneously, you know, a movement kind of mission. It was a call to action. What we wanted our consumers to be doing is indigenizing, you know, their own home economies. Part of what you'll find on our website is, you know, when you go there, you'll see kind of the origin stories during the pandemic. I was our shopper, so I would, you know, leave the house every 2 weeks and do that shopping, and just found myself in the midst of the racial uprising that was happening and the pandemic that was happening, just actually being like super pissed off, walking through the aisles of our local grocery stores, not seeing any. And I would challenge you all in your local grocery stores to try to find tribal or indigenous products on the shelves. And we talk about that as an intentional, right? The settler colonial economy has been so effective that you essentially don't see any of our producers on the shelves right now. And also, giving hints to having our entire economy in the US predicated on the capital extraction and continued capital extraction, right? This isn't just about like land acknowledgements and this thing happened in the past, it continues to happen today. You have two of the largest Walmarts in the nation right outside of tribal communities. And that is still extracting dollars from Indian country. So you see some of the most successful large corporations still extracting dollars from our communities today. And it's really where Indigenize was born. So we started intentionally as a family, seeking out tribal products, indigenizing our own pantry. And I would say 2-3 years ago, you would look at our pantry and you would have seen, whatever Kroger was selling in that pantry. And today it looks very different. There isn't a day that goes by that we don't consume one or several tribal or indigenous products. And we're really proud of that. And we're really challenging other folks to indigenize their own home economies in the same way.
And part of the reason for that business, of course, is how do you bring that opportunity to conscious consumers? Because where you're not seeing them in your local food stores, there are plenty of producers out there. There are tons of product, both tribally produced by native farmers, marketers, purveyors of goods, that absolutely can fit right into your pantry today, fit into your lifestyle, and it probably fits into your values as a shopper and where you want to spend your dollars. So that was a big piece of it, the idea of how do we kind of bring this together and bring visibility and awareness and do it in an exciting and fun way. I mean, it's always good to get gifts, right? So, you get a gift box and you have these things and you see values alignment, you're just excited for it. So, yeah, it's a verb, isn't it? Indigenize.
So you get the next question. So you have a unique vantage point, both as a leader of a nonprofit that's focused on Native business and a business owner yourself. Will you talk about some of the opportunities and challenges that you see in the field of Indigenous entrepreneurship?
Yeah, so that's a long question, right, isn't it? But I guess some of the shorter answers to that is the common challenges that communities of color all face, right? And I think those are things that we've seen in data. We understand what those are, access to capital, challenges with technical assistance and training, equity to even start up the businesses, access to education. These things are all, have been and continue to be a very difficult thing to access for communities of color. I will add in that tribal folks, tribal citizens have, unique challenges as well. I think one of the, when we look at economic mobility, we look at home ownership and we look at entrepreneurship as those avenues for opportunity and prosperity and economic mobility. Those are two of the most difficult things that Native Americans face. When you look at on-reservation and those even off-reservation access and reservation services, housing, equity in housing is not something that they can access. It's set up that way as they do not have ownership of housing in many cases. And so right away you're taking away that leg of it, home ownership, and then you're taking away that equity that to leverage capital to start businesses and small businesses. So you're really kind of getting the double shot right there that really kind of cripples entrepreneurship for Native Americans. And the idea that, I think we have to understand is that Native Americans have always been entrepreneurial in their activities. I think often you'll look back to pre-colonial times and even during colonial time up to today, it's always been commerce and trade. It's always been gathering spots. It's always been intertribal trade. That's been a big driver and mover of people. And so how do we kind of support that spirit and that way of life in the work that we're doing? So, we look at challenges and we look at some of the opportunities. And of course, I'm going to hold up the work that we're doing at the Native Chamber here in the Northwest. And so many of our partners that are really looking to build an ecosystem that fully supports entrepreneurship from the ground up. I think, when I first got into this position, one of the challenges that I saw is that we were only supporting existing businesses, those that were able to really kind of move past so many of the odds and establish these businesses, and organizations were able to engage, and agencies were able to engage with where they were. What was critical is to really kind of start thinking holistically. How do you develop the ecosystem where entrepreneurs thrive? How do you develop capital, and capital that's accessible, capital that doesn't cripple as debt? How do you surround entrepreneurs with well-resourced pathways for entrepreneurial activities, right? So you have to really kind of be intentional about your technical assistance, your training. What we've done is develop curriculum that's culturally specific, culturally congruent. So that entrepreneurs see themselves within that. I think when we first started, we had, a couple of classes and 20 or so students building their businesses. And then I think we just passed over 250 entrepreneurs going through the program in both Oregon, Idaho, and Washington. So, you know what I mean? It's that education piece, and we're proud of that. And then as soon as they go through that program, they have people. They have people that care about them. They have people who help them navigate the system, right? I think when I first came here as an entrepreneur, that's one of the first things I did when I came here is I started a business. I did consulting. And I had to go to meetings. I had to talk to this person. I had to find out where I needed to go for what kind of support, and often I didn't receive that. It's not that there weren't resources, but there wasn't a place where I had someone who said, let me look at your business, and this is what you need for your business. And I think we've started building some of that at the Chamber.
Can I add something?
Yeah, please. Jeez, I'll just keep talking.
You're smart. I could listen to you all day.
She doesn't.
It's going to be that kind of fireside chat. Okay. I will say one particular challenge that I think our business in some ways solves for is, for a long time, I've always talked about social, political, and economic power, right? So social, nonprofit, philanthropic, political, local, state, national government, economic, the business industry, right? So those systems have worked perfectly to get the results that we have right now today, right? The very effective, push out of tribal and native people from the business sector. And I've also talked about, as a nonprofit leader, an advocacy leader, right, making those systems work in the opposite direction. How do we do that? And really understanding that our obligation as citizens and residents of the United States is to, we only, and I guess I'm gonna put my mom's, I'm a mixed person, so half my family's white and half my family's Native. But those of us who are non-Indian people, right, whose ancestors are from that kind of lineage, and not indigenous to what is currently known as the United States, we do have an obligation and an interest, actually, a personal interest in understanding, and we have a stake in whether or not treaties are upheld, because we only have the legal right to live, to govern, and do business on this land if and only if we uphold treaty and trust responsibilities, if and only if we ensure the health and education of tribal people. And I would argue we also have a moral responsibility to do that. And also, we have a responsibility to do it in our everyday jobs. And sometimes when I would often say, you know, how do you do your work every day in ways that respect and uphold tribal sovereignty? And business leaders would often look at me and just be like, I don't know, I make chairs. You know, they would be like, I don't know what you're talking about, because tribal people were so far off, like so far removed in reservation, like not here, that they didn't understand how we would bring them here. And I think as we launched our business, I was really inspired by Faith Myers, who's the owner of Sweet Betty's out in Gresham, who was like, it's a brunch spot. We're all known here in the Pacific Northwest for our nice brunch spots. And she was just like, hey, give me a case of your maple syrup. I mean, it's the best. It's made by the people who invented it. It's so good. And she was like, let me get a case of that. I'll sell it at tables. If people want the real stuff, they can get it. It's right here. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's brilliant. I'm not asking her to like create a native dish. I'm not asking her to, mimic something or culturally appropriate anything. I'm asking her to take a look at the business that she's already invested in and pick one thing that she can incorporate that indigenizes her business. So I think for me too, it also, there's a lot of intentionality that folks talk about in the business arena right now around, intentionally choosing BIPOC businesses, et cetera. And I think we don't get the tribal and native piece right often enough. I think people are confused about who the first people of what we currently call the United States, who we are. There's been a debate over who we are since 1492. People got it wrong then. It's no, mistake that they're getting it wrong now. But I think for me, there's a particular kind of violence, and just like there's a particular kind of violence, there's an anti-Black kind of violence, there's an anti-immigrant kind of violence, there's an anti-Indian kind of violence that happens. And all of these things are a little bit different, but here we are in one of the foodie capitals of the world, and there are 0 brick and mortar tribal restaurants. There are 0 brick and mortar tribal grocery stores. Yet many other communities have that parity. Maybe parity is not the right word.
Well, and you'll also see these first foods parlayed into non-Indian businesses, whether you're talking about huckleberries, right? So you'll see these things show up in these menus, and it'll be highlighting, and yet those these ingredients, which were known and well known and used, that's what we mean by extractive, right? There's no connection within the actual people, who manage this, right? They who tracked where the hunting spots were, where the gathering spots were, and to this day do so, right? And produce these products now. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
That's fine. For me, I guess it comes down right now also to our definition of Indian, to our how we think about indigenizing in this current social and political construct. It's true that everyone is indigenous from somewhere, but we do owe a very different obligation to folks who we signed treaties with their ancestors. And as you think about your businesses moving forward, I would also, I think we're open to it if folks want to have a conversation with us about like, how do you indigenize your business? What does that mean? That's been part of our direct work.
Well, So, as you talk about all the social, political, economic justice, and we talk about other businesses, how does Indigenize kind of act as an expression of these experiences and really kind of as a piece of that movement? What would you say to that?
For me, my work has always been about operationalizing ideas, whether we're talking about Two-Spirit and LGBT justice or the obligation that the state now has to teach Indian history and sovereignty and critical race theory in classrooms in Oregon. It's always been about how do you operationalize it? How do you build a path to that? And I think that's in part, the challenge that we both embarked on was okay, how do we build not just a company? I'm not just, I really make nothing. I fold the box, I put the tissue paper in, and it's a lot of work finding the producers, right? But really, I think, I feel like the Wonder Twins, it's our power combined, is the movement piece behind it. It's how do we operationalize all these DEI values that many companies, and I applaud folks who have statements, but your commitment to DEI isn't in your diversity statement, it's in your practice. It's in how you do what you do. So I think that ability to think about the operationalization of values into the work that we're doing is partly at least how I bring my experience and myself to this work.
Sounds good.
Okay, I have one more for you. When you think broadly about tribes and issues facing tribal people and communities, we spent a lot of time talking about a lot of the challenges. Talk to us about the opportunities on the horizon that you see for enterprise development specifically.
Yeah, for tribal people, tribal producers, tribal businesses, native small businesses, indigenous businesses. There's a lot. There's quite a few, actually. I think when we look at alignment, we'd look at kind of, and it's all buzzwordy, like future-ready economies. What are these economies of the future? But where are the ones that we see alignment with kind of traditional cultural values, right? So the opportunity to engage in clean energy and regenerative, alternatives to fossil fuels. So to me, we're talking about green building, construction, renewable energy, solar installation, water conservation, applications. And we're seeing all that kind of really spurred on by local and state and huge federal investment, right? And so we know it's a huge opportunity. And what we want to do is not be on the tail end. We want to be on the forefront. We need the education, we need the backing, we need the support to really kind of put our businesses in a position where they're at the forefront of where the economy is heading. I think another great one is kind of looking at developing regional food networks, and I think quite a few of you are probably connected to that concept in this room. But when you kind of develop local-centered regional food distribution networks that accesses local producers, that's scalable, that's equitable, that's sustainable, and really kind of puts local priorities on the top of that. I think that's a huge piece of that as well. I think when we think broadly, I think those are things that are happening right now. I think as we look at developing these regional networks, how they communicate with each other, I think one of the pieces that I love to see is that concept of how are we accessing and developing and supporting intertribal trade, and then intertribal trade or trade within tribal citizens, indigenous people globally, right? For example, in the Pacific Rim. There are existing mechanisms right now in international trade agreements where indigenous to indigenous actually is exempt for certain tariff and taxes, which creates an opportunity for quite a few of these businesses, right? And so how is that being supported? How is it being mobilized? I think we have some ideas that we'd like to see come fruition as we talk down the line. So I love that idea. And yeah, I mean, I think that the last piece I would say is bring it back local. It's just kind of looking at how do we create our main streets, right? Too often, so we have a home back in Rocky Boy, which is the reservation where my family's from. And there is no downtown available. There is no main street. There's no shopping centers. There's no goods production. Every dollar that everybody accesses on reservation leaves immediately. It is gone immediately. Everybody goes into town for literally everything. And this is not a one reservation out of, like, this is how it generally operates on all these reservations. So how do we create and support the idea of like these local economies that create this regenerative dollar spend by producing the goods and services that the community uses, needs. And so these are just exciting projects and process that I think a lot of people are putting a lot of energy into that we'd like to see coming forward.
Yeah, I mean, it's not just yes, it is all about the beadwork. Let me just be clear. We have amazing beadwork, and it's about the everyday, like all of those things. Can I talk a little bit about our logo?
Oh, please.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because Tori was talking earlier about his logo, and when we first started out, we just started our business 2021.
Yeah.
Last year.
Yeah.
So we've only been around a little over a year. We've only had a website for not even a year yet.
Not yet. Not quite.
But really proud. We had a native graphic designer from up in Washington work on this, and it's actually a pictograph. One of the commerce centers that James was talking about historically was Celilo, the place where my family is from. And when Celilo was flooded in 1957, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers blasted out some of the pictographs that were on the side of the river. And the one that you see pictured as our main logo was one of those pictographs that was pulled down and for a while displayed on the Dalles Dam, which was responsible for the flooding of our village. It now sits at a state park up on the Washington side. But for us, that connection back to, Celilo was one of the oldest known settlements in the West. It was also a trade center. And so as we thought about, the movement that we wanted to build as a family, it was kind of the return back to us as a center of trade and with that vision in mind.
With our last 2 minutes.
Oh, yeah.
What do you see as success in 5 years for this business?
I don't know. What do you see as success in the next 5 years?
I think elevating the producers that we work with. I think first and foremost, that's part of why this business was started, is to raise the visibility, bring the connections. For all these producers, not just kind of locally, but really kind of nationwide. There's just fantastic products that you use every day that could probably be in your office or your home or your store right now, and it would make a huge difference. And, we stand by them, right? All right, your turn.
I used to work at a natural food co-op, so I'm a little hippy-dippy Oregonian like that. And although I was the non-foods buyer, but I really would love to see, I would really love to get eventually maybe into more distribution. Right now there isn't, we have a relationship with the Intertribal Agriculture Council, and nationally they're the group that a lot of tribal producers go to for a lot of technical assistance, but there isn't a company right now that does, drop shipping fulfillment and really focuses on lifting up Indigenous businesses. And I would love to fill that space, to fill that need, and build out in that area.
Yeah, and expand the reach of the current operation as well. Yeah. All right. Look, his timer went off right there.
Good job.
We timed it perfectly.
Thank you so much, Edmo with Seeding Justice and Indigenize, and James Allen Parker.